Let's get right into it. The Baker Street robbery. When the case wasn't solved, just stopped. In September of 1971, a small leather goods shop appeared near Baker Street in London. It wasn't remarkable. That was its strength. The city was already crowded with temporary storefronts, short-lived businesses, and forgotten leases. This one blended in perfectly. Nothing about it suggested permanence. Nothing about it invited attention. Beneath the shop floor, however, permanence was exactly what the thieves were building. A tunnel began to take shape, inch by inch, not hastily, not recklessly. This wasn't a hole carved in panic. It was engineered, reinforced, measured against detailed plans that accounted for distance, depth, vibration, and structural load. The men digging knew precisely how much noise they could make before someone above would notice. They knew where utility lines ran. They knew which supports could be avoided and which had to be respected. This was not improvisation. This was rehearsal. The tunnel stretched nearly 50 feet, threading its way beneath one of the busiest areas of London. At its end sat the vault of Lloyd's Bank, a vault assumed to be untouchable not because it was impenetrable, but because no one imagined someone would approach it from below. When the thieves finally broke through, they entered a space designed to protect not just money, but privacy. Hundreds of safety deposit boxes lined the walls. Some contained cash, some held jewelry. Others contained documents, photographs, letters, and records that were never meant to be seen by anyone outside a small circle of trust. The robbery took place over a weekend, calmly, methodically. The thieves opened box after box, discussing their contents openly over radios. There was no rush, no sense of panic. They behaved like men who knew they were not on a clock. At one point, something went wrong. A radio enthusiast in the area picked up their transmissions. Curious, then alarmed, he contacted the police. Law enforcement moved quickly. Surveillance was established. Officers listened in as the thieves spoke in real time about what they were finding. This is the moment where every crime story changes direction. The thieves should have been caught. Instead, the investigation stopped. Not slowed, not stalled, stopped. Orders came down abruptly. Surveillance was pulled. Officers were reassigned. The case went quiet. Evidence was sealed. The momentum vanished as if someone had reached over and turned off the lights. No explanation was given publicly. No justification offered. Years later, journalists digging through the remains of the case began to hear whispers, rumors that some of the safety deposit boxes belonged to powerful individuals, politicians, business leaders, intelligence-linked figures, people whose secrets carried consequences far greater than the loss of money. A few arrests occurred years later, tied to unrelated offenses. None resulted in convictions for the full crime. Most of the stolen material was never recovered. No comprehensive list of missing items was ever released. The most disturbing element of the Baker Street robbery is not the tunnel. It's the silence that followed it. Because someone, somewhere, decided that solving the crime was more dangerous than leaving it unanswered. The Great Maple Syrup Heist. Theft that hid in plain sight. Between 2011 and 2012, something began quietly disappearing from a warehouse in Quebec. Not weapons, not art, not cash, maple syrup. Canada maintains a strategic maple syrup reserve, tens of thousands of barrels stored to stabilize prices and prevent market collapse. It's an institution so mundane it borders on absurd, and that absurdity is exactly what made it vulnerable. The warehouse wasn't heavily guarded. It didn't need to be. Syrup doesn't feel like something worth stealing at a scale. It's sticky, heavy, boring, the kind of commodity that fades into the background of commerce. Over the course of months, thieves began siphoning syrup out of barrels and replacing it with water. They didn't empty everything at once. That would have been noticed. They worked slowly, quietly, incrementally, each barrel altered just enough to avoid suspicion. Inventory systems didn't flag the theft. Weight differences were subtle. Visual inspections revealed nothing unusual. Guards passed by rows of barrels that looked exactly as they always had. The crime wasn't discovered until a routine audit, when inspectors moved a barrel and heard water slosh inside. The illusion shattered. Nearly 10,000 barrels had been compromised. The estimated value exceeded $18 million, but the true brilliance of the operation wasn't the theft. It was what happened next. Maple syrup is not fenced like stolen art. It isn't melted like gold. It's consumed. Once it re-enters the supply chain, it becomes indistinguishable from legitimate product. It gets blended, bottled, shipped, and sold across the world. Some participants were eventually identified and arrested. A fraction of the syrup was recovered, but most of it vanished permanently into kitchens, restaurants, and grocery stores worldwide. No dramatic getaway, no disguises, no confrontation. Just the realization that sometimes the most effective theft is the one that looks too boring to notice. The Hatton heist, when time did the work. In 2015, one of London's most secure safe deposit facilities was breached. What made the crime remarkable wasn't speed or innovation, it was patience. The men responsible were elderly, in their 60s and 70s, not the demographic typically associated with high-risk crime. That assumption worked in their favor. They targeted Hatton Garden Safe Deposit, a vault protected by thick concrete walls, alarms, and decades of reputation. Instead of trying to defeat the system in one night, they returned again and again. They drilled, stopped, left, came back, adjusted, and continued. Progress was slow, painfully slow. But slow doesn't trigger alarms. Slow doesn't look like an emergency. Over several nights, they bored through the concrete and gained access to the vault. Inside were millions of pounds in cash, gold, and jewelry. Dense, portable wealth. The kind of assets that can vanish quickly if handled correctly. Eventually, several of the men were arrested. The story made headlines. Elderly thieves caught pulling off a daring heist. But investigators quickly realized something didn't add up. Large sums of money were missing, not misplaced, gone. Authorities believed there was at least one unseen organizer, younger, smarter, and invisible. Someone who planned logistics, disposal, and laundering while others took the visible risk. What makes the Hatton Garden heist unsettling isn't that the thieves succeeded, it's that they trusted time more than chaos, and time, as it turned out, was enough. A Banco Central heist, 3 months beneath the system. In 2005, a group of men rented a modest commercial property in Fortaleza, Brazil. Nothing about the building raised suspicion. Short-term leases were common. Businesses came and went. The kind of place that existed briefly and left no memory behind. Inside, the men didn't set up a shop. They started digging. What followed was not a tunnel in the cinematic sense. No frantic shoveling, no collapsing walls. This was engineering. Over the course of 3 months, the group excavated a tunnel nearly 80 meters long, reinforced with wood, fitted with lighting, and ventilated to allow continuous work without detection. They dug beneath streets, utilities, and buildings, carefully calculating load and vibration. Every inch forward was deliberate. They weren't racing the clock. They were living beneath it. The tunnel emerged directly beneath the vault of Banco Central branch. When they broke through, they didn't trigger alarms. They didn't need to rush. Inside the vault were stacks of currency, real physical cash. No serial tracking, no die packs, no immediate digital footprint, just paper money stored under the assumption that no one could reach it. They took over $70 million. By the time the theft was discovered, the tunnel was empty. The rented building was abandoned. The men were gone. Authorities launched a massive investigation. Some suspects were identified, A few arrests were made, but the money itself told a different story. Cash is uniquely suited to vanishing. It doesn't need to be fenced like art. It doesn't need to be recut like diamonds. It doesn't need to be melted like gold. It only needs to be broken apart, fragmented, moved slowly, converted into legitimate businesses, real estate, consumer spending, and black market exchanges. Investigators believe the stolen money was divided into thousands of small streams, each too insignificant to trigger attention. By the time law enforcement understood the scale, the cash had already dissolved into the economy. The tunnel was impressive, but the real brilliance wasn't underground. It was temporal. This heist didn't escape the system. It waited until the system absorbed it. The Antwerp Diamond Heist, beating a system designed to be unbeatable. In 2003, the Antwerp Diamond Center represented something rare in modern security design: confidence, not just protection, but certainty. The building was equipped with infrared sensors, seismic detectors, magnetic field monitors, motion alarms, and layered vault systems. Each existed not as a single point of failure, but as part of a web designed to detect intrusion no matter how it occurred. It was considered impossible to defeat without triggering at least one alarm. The thieves understood something the designers did not. Security systems don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they are predictable. The perpetrators didn't brute force their way in. They studied, they tested, they learned how sensors behaved under specific conditions. Some alarms were fooled, others were neutralized. A few were bypassed entirely because the thieves understood their operational assumptions better than the engineers who installed them. The theft occurred overnight. When staff arrived the next morning, over $100 million in diamonds were gone. No alarms had sounded. No forced entry was obvious. The vault looked intact until it wasn't. An investigation followed. Arrests were made, but something crucial never happened. The diamonds didn't surface. Not in seizures, not in sting operations, not in black market recoveries. Because diamonds are not meant to be hidden. They are meant to be changed. Once recut, a diamond loses its original proportions. Once regraded, it loses its original classification. Once sold into legitimate channels, it becomes untraceable. A stolen diamond doesn't stay stolen. It becomes someone else's engagement ring. Authorities believed the visible participants were expendable, that arrests were anticipated, that the real architect never touched the stones and never needed to. The building was secure. The flaw was assuming security ends at the vault door. This heist didn't steal diamonds. It erased their history. The Brinks-Mat gold robbery, when stolen value enters the world. In 1983, a group of armed men broke into a warehouse near Heathrow Airport. They expected to find cash. What they discovered instead was something far more dangerous: 3 tons of gold bullion. Gold is not just wealth, it is memory. Every bar is stamped, tracked, accounted for. It carries provenance, and that provenance is what makes it traceable. So the thieves destroyed it. They melted the bars down, recast the gold into new forms, mixed it with legitimate sources, distributed it slowly through criminal networks and crucially legitimate refiners. Gold laundering is not fast, it's patient. Each step removes a layer of identity until the metal no longer remembers where it came from. Law enforcement arrested several individuals connected to the robbery, but most of the gold was never recovered, not because it was hidden, but because it no longer existed in its original form. Experts believe a measurable percentage of gold jewelry in circulation today contains metal from that robbery: wedding rings, necklaces, coins, objects passed down as heirlooms. The gold didn't disappear. It entered the world. This is what makes the Brinks-Mat robbery uniquely disturbing. The stolen value didn't stay separate from society. It merged with it, became normal, became trusted. The crime didn't end. It diffused.